We have quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are we ready to get started? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the September 4th, 2018 meeting. Madam Clerk, are we ready? Okay. I want to welcome you back to the September 4th, 2018 meeting of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Thank you for being here with us today. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll for attendance?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Brown. Brown present. Supervisor Cohen.
Here.
Cohen present. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer present. Supervisor Kim. Kim not present. Supervisor Mandelman.
Present.
Mandelman present. Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan present. Supervisor Safai.
Present.
Safai present. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Yi.
Present.
Yi present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me by rising and placing your right hand over your heart for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
There are none to report, Madam President.
All right, thank you. So, colleagues, today is a special day because we are going to be approving minutes from the July 10th, July 17th, July 24th, and the July 31st, 2018 full board meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Motion made by Supervisor Kim, seconded by Supervisor Yi. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? All right, without objection, those meetings will be approved after public comment. Madam Clerk, please call the consent agenda.
Items 1 through 5
Yes.
are on consent. These items are considered to be routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
Colleagues, would anyone like to sever any item on the consent agenda?
Yes, please. Can you please divide item number one?
Yes. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll on the remaining balance?
On items 2 through 5, Supervisor Peskin. Aye. Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan.
Aye.
Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Thank you. Without objections, item 2 through 5 passes. Madam Clerk, please call item 1.
Item 1 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to establish and set rules governing the appointment of the director and the qualifications and duties of employees of the Office of Sexual Harassment and Assault Response and Prevention as a city department under the direction and oversight of the Human Rights Commission.
Thank you. Supervisor Ronan?
Thank you, President Cohen. Colleagues, I, along with all of you, received a 5-page letter today from the Municipal Attorneys Association at 11:45 asking us to postpone the second vote on this legislation, and I quote, because of the speed with which the ordinance has been moved through the Board of Supervisors. Before I discuss the content of their argument, why they're asking for the postponement, I just wanted to talk about how long this piece of legislation has been before us. I first introduced the legislation on May 8th, about 5 months ago, and a month earlier I had held a hearing at the Board of Supervisors where woman after woman came forward who was raped and had a horrible experience dealing with the city and county of San Francisco, whether it was the police department, the DA's office, sometimes even at General Hospital. And then after that, I introduced the SHARP ordinance that's before us today on final reading as a solution to the horror stories that we heard time and time again. After I introduced the legislation, I met and conferred with city unions. At that meet and confer, there were representatives from MEA, from SEIU 10 to 1, from Local 21, from the Sheriff's Office. Even the machinist showed up. But the Municipal Attorneys Association did not decide to attend. They never got in touch with me, not at that point, not in the 4 months later that passed when this legislation was before us. They didn't make a peep when there were 2 hearings at the Board of the Supervisors, one at the Rules Committee and another was at the Budget Committee. We even talked about this legislation pretty substantially at the budget hearings. Yeah. So to say that this has moved, I said rules, the chair of rules is reminding me. This legislation was talked about quite a bit, and I find it incredibly unprofessional at the 11th hour to send a 5-page letter asking us to postpone the legislation when nobody from the union ever reached out to me at any point during this long process. As a matter of fact, after the meet and confer where all the unions decided, yes, this is a great piece of legislation, let's move forward, a couple unions did reach out to me after the fact, and we accommodated them even though we didn't have to because the meet and confer process had ended, and made several amendments to the ordinance. But that's just on the process. Let me talk about the content. The entire reason that I introduced the SHARP ordinance is because I am hearing story after story after story of women, mostly women, although I have heard stories from men as well, who were raped and then came to the city for help and were blamed, disrespected, mistreated, not believed, and were shunned and pushed away. We heard these stories at the Board of Supervisors. From the DA's office itself, we heard that one woman was told by the DA in the Special Victims Unit that because she was drugged before she was raped, it was just a case of, he said she doesn't remember, so they're not going to move forward with it. In another case, a woman came forward and they had decided not to go forward with her case. And when she called the DA's office to say, you haven't even talked to me, why aren't you going forward with my case? The DA told her that he listened to the accused pretext call and heard him describe the sex as consensual and therefore was refusing to take the case forward. When the survivor finally tracked him down because she didn't give up and said, I'm not sure why you can't prosecute this. I taught a college course on sex crimes and I know the law. He responded, the law is not what they taught in your little class. And continued to insist that they couldn't take the case. The survivor then had to civilly sue the accused and ended up winning quite a settlement, and eventually the DA did bring her case forward 2 years later and was able to successfully prosecute. The whole point of this legislation is we are now going to create an office when a victim of sexual assault and rape is treated in this manner by any city employee. They can come to an office and say, I need help. I'm not being believed. I'm being belittled, I'm not being respected, and frankly, this experience is almost worse than the rape itself. That's the purpose of this legislation. If the DA is going to bring a case forward, which is the bulk of this 5-page memo, and feels that any sort of meeting with the SHARP office would interrupt any attorney-client privilege, then there's ample opportunity to show up and say that, and that would be sufficient. That's not what this office is going to do. In 99% of the case, when a complaint is brought to SHARP, it's because the DA is not going to move forward on the case. They're not going to bring any case forward where any evidence or attorney-client privilege issues could come up. So in that case, their entire reasoning in this 5-page memo makes no sense at all. So I have to say, I am frankly, as an attorney myself, I am frankly flabbergasted at the lack of professionalism of this union, and I would encourage all of my colleagues to pass this legislation as quickly as we can today and get it to the mayor's desk for signature, because clearly, if this doesn't evidence how badly we need this office in the city and county of San Francisco, I don't know what will. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ronan. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but I actually want to differentiate between a union and a bargaining unit. And the Municipal Attorneys Association is a bargaining unit. It is actually not a union. It's not an affiliate of the AFL-CIO. Obviously, they negotiate or oftentimes arbitrate their contract on an annual basis. But I do want to concur with Supervisor Ronan. Had this letter come from the district attorney, it would be a very different letter. But insofar as you and your office, I think, have reached out, and correctly so, to municipal labor, both bargaining units and unions, this is a little too late.
Thank you. Colleagues, is there any other discussion? Is there an action that you'd like us to take, Supervisor Ronan?
Yes, let's pass this unanimously on final vote.
All right. Supervisor Catherine Stephanie. Oh, okay. Let's call the vote. Madam Clerk.
On item 1, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 11 ayes.
All right. This item 1, passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call item 6.
Item 6 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to prohibit cannabis retail and medical cannabis dispensaries in the Chinatown mixed-use districts, to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Madam Clerk, on the question of shall this ordinance be finally passed, please call the roll.
On item 6, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, no. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, no. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
No.
Mandelman, no. There are 8 ayes and 3 noes, with Supervisors Ronan, Brown, and Mandelman in the dissent.
Thank you. This item is passed. Madam Clerk, please call item 7.
Item 7 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to allow payment of an in lieu fee for an ADU's street tree requirement, to affirm the Planning Department CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
All right, thank you. Seeing that there are no names on the roster, colleagues, Madam Clerk, on the question of shall this ordinance be finally passed, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, no. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Kim, no. Okay. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 9 ayes and 2 noes, with Supervisors Fewer and Kim in the dissent.
All right, thank you. This item is passed. Please call items 8 and 9 together.
Item 8 is a resolution to authorize the execution and delivery of a multifamily housing revenue note in one or more series in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed approximately $35.7 million for the purpose of providing financing for the construction of an 81-unit multifamily rental housing project known as 490 South Van Ness Avenue. And item 9 is the resolution to approve and authorize a long-term ground lease with 490 South Van Ness Housing Associates on city-owned land at 490 South Van Ness Avenue for a term of 75 years with a $15,000 annual base rent to construct a 100% affordable 80-unit multifamily rental housing development for low-income persons and to adopt the appropriate findings.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. On the question of shall these resolutions be adopted, please call the roll.
On items 8 and 9, Supervisor Peskin. Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer? Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman?
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Excellent, thank you. Without objection, these resolutions are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call items 10 through 12.
Items 10 through 12 are two resolutions to authorize the Department of Public Health Community Behavioral Health Services to enter into agreements. For item 10, to enter into a retroactive amended agreement with the California Department of Health Care Services to change the agreement's end date from April 30th, 2018 to June 30th, 2017, with no change to the amount not to exceed approximately $293 million. And item 11 is to retroactively approve an agreement with the California Department of Health Care Services for the San Francisco Mental Health Plan for a 5-year term, July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2022, without costs. And Madam President, you said item 12 as well?
Yes, please.
Item 12 is a retroactive approval of a contract agreement with the Regents of the University of California for behavioral health services for adults and older adults for a contract term of 4 years, July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022, in an amount not to exceed approximately $22.8 million.
Colleagues, can we take this same House, same call? Without objection, these resolutions are passed unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item 13 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to conditionally permit massage establishments as defined in the Union Street Neighborhood Commercial District, to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, can we take these items same House, same call?
Madam President.
Oh, Supervisor Stephanie.
Thank you, President Cohen. Colleagues, this ordinance would allow 3 vetted businesses operating in the Union Street Neighborhood Commercial District to apply for a permit under Supervisor Tang's 2015 Massage Establishments Ordinance. What happened here was they did not complete the process on time, and this basically allows for an extension to avoid any vacancies on the street and in the Union Neighborhood Commercial District. It only applies to the Union Street NCD and only allows them 18 months to complete the process. I want to thank the Land Use Committee for passing it out with positive recommendation, and I ask for your support.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing none, can we take these items same House, same call? All right, without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item 14 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to permit affordable housing on undeveloped lots in service arts lights industrial zoning districts, and to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take this item same House, same call? Oh, Supervisor Kim, I see you on the roster.
Thank you, President Cohen. The ordinance before us allows an additional use on parcels that are currently zoned Sally. This was a new zoning through the Western Soma Plan, where we worked to ensure that we were preserving production, distribution, repair, as well as the arts in the South of Market neighborhood. Prior to the Western Soma Plan passage, these parcels were zoned SLI, which allowed the development of affordable housing on these parcels. With the Western Soma Plan changes, we took out affordable housing as a permittable use. This legislation will reinstate that use of only 100% affordable housing on lots, Sally lots, where there is no existing development or habitable buildings, meaning that we won't be displacing any existing arts, production, distribution, repair for affordable housing, but we will be putting forward our prioritization of ensuring that we preserve Sally uses while also ensuring that we increase the market for potential sites for 100% affordable housing, something that we greatly need here in San Francisco. I do want to recognize Sophie Hayward, who is in the audience today, and used to be with us here at the city, both the Plan Department and Mayor's Office of Housing, and who is now at the Tipping Point Foundation. Tipping Point had been interested in locating a site where they would build 100% affordable housing for formerly homeless individuals, and had found a parking lot, which is not the best and highest use of any parcels here in our city and county, and certainly not in the South of Market. This passage of legislation would allow either the city, a nonprofit, or a foundation like Tipping Point to move forward on a Sally parcel that is vacant or that is a parking lot, permitted or unpermitted, to allow us to build 100% affordable housing. So colleagues, I ask for your support on this ordinance, and also just want to recognize all the partners that were involved in putting this forward, and want to thank my colleagues on the Land Use Committee who passed this item unanimously.
Thank you. Supervisor Brown?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Supervisor Kim and Tipping Point and all the others who were involved in this. I think we really need to, as a city, look creatively at how to increase housing on underutilized sites, both private and public. And I think we need to look hard at establishing rules and regulations to find every opportunity to build housing. I'm committed to do this in my district, which I hope everyone else is also. In my last job at OEWD Joint Development, I looked at opportunity sites, private and public, to build affordable housing. And I feel it's just really important. I think city sites should be first batter up to actually build the housing. And I just want to make sure the city must lead in this. And thank you, Supervisor Kim, for taking that lead.
All right, seeing that there are no other members on the roster, colleagues, can we take the same house, same call? All right, without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item 15 is an ordinance to amend the Public Works Code to repeal the Reclaimed Water Use Ordinance and to affirm the department's CEQA determination.
Well, folks, the PUC has requested that this item be sent back to the Land Use and Transportation Committee in order for them to continue to propose some amendments to maximize water use efficiency. I was wondering if there's any colleague that'd like to make a motion. I see Supervisor Peskin will motion to send this back to the Transportation Committee. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Safai, and we'll take that motion without objection. And this is a motion to send back to committee. It's approved. Thank you. Without unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item, please.
The next three items, Madam President, are
Yes,
the
please.
3 p.m. special orders. And given that it's not 2:30 yet, we can't start the commendation period. So I suggest roll call for introductions.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Supervisor Peskin, you're first up to introduce new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam President, colleagues, I have a number of things to discuss and introduce at roll call. I first just wanted to start by thanking our Assembly member Phil Ting and our entire legislative delegation, Senator Wiener and Assembly member Chu, for getting Assembly Bill 1184 through in the waning hours of the legislative session, and that is the legislation that would allow this Board of Supervisors to, subject to approval by the voters, have a TNC tax in the city and county of San Francisco. It awaits the governor's signature, and I would like to thank Mayor Breed and her staff for their support of that as well. And particular thanks to my staff, Sunny Angulo, who worked it through the state legislature over our summer recess. While we are on the topic of public transportation, I know that there has been some concern over a policy matter at the SFMTA with regard to the philosophical debate about whether or not our public transportation infrastructure should be used for private transportation interests in the city's public realm. And to that end, you'll recall we recently passed legislation to allow in certain instances an appeal of MTA decisions to this Board of Supervisors pursuant to the Charter Amendment Proposition A of 2007. And today I'm going to introduce an amendment to the Board's review authority that would remove the exemption for bus rapid transportation projects until we can ensure that these projects are truly being prioritized for public_muni transportation, and I think that's appropriate as we approach Transit Week here in San Francisco. And I want to acknowledge and thank the San Francisco Transit Riders for their support of this ordinance. You will recall that 2 years ago, we had a different Prop C on the ballot. That was the Proposition C to repurpose the post-Loma Prieta 1992 vintage seismic safety bonds. Really, at that time, we had a number of fires in District Number 9 as well as in District 3, and we were hoping to repurpose some of the unspent $350 million, about $261 million, and over the last count it 2 years, my office has been working with affordable housing stakeholders and the Mayor's Office of Housing and the City Attorney to devise a regulatory framework for implementing this program of very low-cost money to help rehab small sites and SROs and help nonprofits permanently acquire affordable housing. So we are finally ready to introduce these regulations, and I want to thank organizers from Choo Choo and Mission Housing and Chinatown CDC, the Land Trust, Dan Adams and Amy Chan from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, as well as Mark Blake from the City Attorney's Office for all of their long and hard work on this effort, as well as my staff. I have a number of other pieces of legislation that I will submit, but I would like to adjourn today's meeting in the memory of our former zoning administrator, Mary Gallagher. I'm very sorry that she passed away far too young at the end of July. She came from back east in New York, where she attended State University before going to Cornell and ultimately coming here to start a distinguished career in urban planning. She quickly rose to the position of Assistant Director of Planning here and then became Chief of Planning in San Mateo after some of the politicians in this town did not like her standing up as zoning administrator for what was right, particularly around rulings having to do with Sutro Tower, which she would not back down on. She was absolutely right and ultimately suffered political wrath for it. And she was a kindred spirit. She loved the outdoors and national parks with her family and friends and kids. She's survived by her life partner, Guadalupe Gamino, and her daughter, Megan, her sister, Anne, and her brothers, Mark, John. And I know she was a real dear friend to many community organizations and community members here in San Francisco, and we all mourn her loss. And then I'd also like to adjourn today's meeting in the memory of Linda Peterson, an artist in North Beach, who you will recall was one of the street artists who, after Super Bowl 50, came and testified before this body about how she had been pushed out of her work, where she made a meager living by selling her fantastic art on the streets. And I've got a piece of it in my office if anybody wants to come and see it. And she too will be missed. She fell critically ill during the legislative recess and into a coma and succumbed at St. Francis Memorial Hospital, and the rest I will submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Madam President, it's now 2:30.
Thank you. Seeing that it's 2:30, I think we should pivot and go to accommodations, and I understand that Supervisor Kim has a special accommodation that she'd like to present today. So, Supervisor Kim, if you'd like to present, the floor is yours.
And I did want to ask members of the community, along with Jesse Gonzalez, to come up to the podium. Colleagues, I'm asking us to end our board meeting today in memory of Dr. Dawn Mahualano Mabalon. Today, we are honoring her posthumously for the incredible work and leadership that she has done for the community. On August 10th, one of our great sheroes, Dr. Dawn Mabalon, passed away unexpectedly while on vacation with her family in Kauai. She was surrounded by her family and her loved ones in this unexpected passing. It is a great loss to all of us who have known her. She is a respected historian, author, filmmaker, poet, chef and baker, community leader, and activist. And she leaves us with an important and far-reaching legacy, grounded in love for the Filipino-American community and beyond. Dawn will always be in the hearts of her family, her friends, and the many communities and generations that she touched. For her focus on the Filipina and Filipino-American community, Dawn is a premier historian of our generation, an associate professor with tenure at the Department of History at San Francisco State University. Dawn is the third generation Pinay born in Stockton, California in 1972. She was raised on the South Side in a close-knit, large, and loving family, as we can see here today. In 1997, she moved back to the Bay Area when she accepted a fellowship to complete a PhD in American history at Stanford University, which was when I met Dawn as a junior. She joined Stanford at a time of particular vibrancy amongst graduates of color studying race in America and was an important part of this community. And in fact, my senior year, I took a class with Dawn on Asian American culture. She was well known for her commitment to community-based history and her strengths in gender and ethnicity, her energy and humor within our community, but also her support for and solidarity with other graduate students. In 2004, to none of our surprise, she joined the faculty of the Department of History at San Francisco State University. She was loved by her students, where they not only learned to love history, but also came to love learning. Through her dynamic lectures and interactive discussions, which I know so well, her witty humor and commentary, and through the times that she would cook and bake for her students, which is extraordinary, she touched our hearts and our stomachs. For nearly 2 decades, in partnership with her best friend, Dr. Allison Tinglialgo Cabales, she also conducted public school teacher training in Filipina, American, and Asian American studies, ethnic studies, and the United States history for public school teachers in San Francisco and Stockton, and for Pinay Educational Partnership. In fact, now Supervisor Fewer, then school board member, and I introduced the ordinance that she and Allison had wrote to establish ethnic studies as a curriculum in all of our public high schools in San Francisco. Dawn is believed to have been the first Pinay to earn a PhD in American history from Stanford University, and her dissertation eventually became the award-winning book published by Duke University, Little Manila is in the Heart, The Making of the Filipino-American Community in Stockton, California, now in its 6th printing. In addition to her scholarly and creative endeavors, Dawn worked extensively in our community. She was the tireless advocate for saving Little Manila and co-founded the Little Manila Foundation with Dylan Delvo in 1999. After learning about the significance of their hometown, Stockton, to the Filipino-American history, they literally found demolition equipment in front of buildings of what remained of the Little Manila community, the largest population of Filipinos in the world outside of the Philippines from the 1920s to the 1960s. She founded and was a board member of Little Manila Foundation, and she continued to work for the preservation and revitalization of the Little Manila historic site in Stockton. In fact, much of our work for Soma Filipinos and social cultural districts, which are now establishing throughout San Francisco, came through her work that she did in Stockton, California. She also received many awards and even worked with the Black Eyed Peas in developing the Bebop music videos to spread awareness on Filipina culture. Empowered by activism and research of their hometown, Little Manila Rising students fought for ethnic studies to be institutionalized in Stockton Unified School District and won. Dawn loved her family with so much heart. She is survived by her husband, Jesse, who she loves so deeply. And Jesse, I just want to tell you how much I love you and just how much you have also done for our community. And my heart just breaks for you. I want to recognize her sister, Darlene, her caring older sister, Manong, her godchild, Tyandi Kelly, her niece, Nanoye, her nephew, Kaiden, her mom, Christine, who longs for her pride-worthy daughter, her uncle, Delphine, and wife, Wendy, her aunts, Virginia, Auntie Addie and Uncle Mel, her uncle, Tex, Auntie Sonia, and her cousin and godmother, Joan. She has a very large family of cousins, nieces, godchildren, godparents, and a whole generation of Filipino Americans. Dawn is remembered as Auntie Ninong, or Ninong Dawn, and she has many children that she has helped to raise, including Mayala, professor, daughter, wife, sister, friend, filmmaker, historian, Tita, godmother, Ninong. Dawn encouraged us to have a conversation with our ancestors. She left many gifts to help us figure out what happened to the Filipino American community, to help us understand who we are. And we take heed of her lessons to talk with our ancestors about what kind of communities and families we created so we know who we can become. She's a fan of the Giants and of so many of us, and our biggest cheerleader. And because of what she has left behind, we will be able to continue this conversation with her, cultivating the laughter that she shared, advocating for her activism and academic agenda, to continue to cook her food and to feed her community, and the love that she shared for all of our communities. Colleagues, I want to give Jessie and her family a moment to say a few words about Dawn, who we plan on honoring this October of Filipino Heritage Month as well. And it just breaks my heart that we were not able to do that in person, and to thank her for all that she has done for all of us. Jessie.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim, for that amazing tribute and recognition of life. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. As the supervisor for Manila Town and a lifelong believer in the power of historic and cultural preservation, which I know Dawn was a huge champion of, I wanted to extend my deepest condolences to Jessie and the rest of Dawn's family on her tragic loss, which I know is giant for the Filipino community in all of San Francisco. And Supervisor Kim has already listed why Dawn was so important, but really there would not be a Manila Town legacy without her. And I say as a many decades friend of Bill Sorrow, and I know that he was deeply involved with the Manila Town Heritage Foundation, as was Dawn as a board member. And she turned on so many young people like Jane back in the day. So I just know this leaves a tremendous hole in the community and the entire city. So on behalf of the board, I also want to recognize Dawn's contributions and mourn her loss.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin, and to the family. Just want you to know that I know it's a tremendous loss in the Filipino community, but I want to assure you that this is a loss for the entire city family. Her legacy and her work transcends just the Filipino community, but it will be part of the San Francisco legacy and part of our social fabric. And colleagues, if we could take without objection closing the board meeting out in honor of Ms. Dawn's memory, if we could take that without objection. All right, without objection. Thank you. Supervisor Kim, is there anything? All right. To the family, I want to just give you an opportunity to speak with your heart to address this body. Welcome.
I just want to thank the Board of Supervisors and Supervisor Kim. Thank you very much, and it means a lot. We just want to continue Dawn's legacy, to keeping the history. No matter what age you are, we just want to keep the history. It's not about the past. It should always be the present and the future. And if you allow me, Dawn's mom would like to say something. Please, thank you.
In behalf of my family, thank you so much for bestowing posthumously this award for Dawn Mabalan, my beloved Dawn Mabalan. She loved people so much. She wanted to do anything to help people. She had so many aspirations, and she finally found her calling. But we're going to keep her legacy alive in our hearts. We're going to forge forward and continue what she started. Thank you so much. This honor means so much to us. We have so much gratitude, and it's such an honor. But I know Dawn, she would be so humbled Thank you again for honoring Dawn, and we'll forge ahead and continue what she started. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we're going to, at this time, we're going to continue with roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the next supervisor.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Ronan will submit. Okay, Supervisor Safai.
Re-refer, please.
Re-refer. Supervisor Stephanie. Okay, thank you. Supervisor Tang.
Submit.
Thank you. Supervisor Yi.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm calling a hearing on our city vetting process of the safety records of our city contractors. Over our legislative recess on August 10th, one of the workers on the Twin Peaks tunnel construction project, Patrick Ricketts, tragically died when a steel beam fell and pinned him underneath the steel beam. No one should have to suffer the pain of losing a loved one due to a death working on a city contract. We later learned that the Oakland-based subcontractor, CIMIC Construction, had a history of workplace and safety violations, including a violation involving another fatality. In documents obtained by the media, CIMIC checked no when asked, in the past 10 years, has the potential bidder or if a joint venture partnership has any member of the partnership been cited for any serious and willful safety violations by Cal-OSHA, or California Occupational Safety and Health Administration. According to SFMTA, the contractor represented that they met the requirements to pre-qualify for the bid. Although the tunnel work has already been completed, the investigation of this incident is ongoing and will take about 4 to 6 months. While I am calling for a hearing to investigate safety concerns regarding the evaluation of all the city contractors across all of our city agencies, not only SFMTA, what I'm finding out is that apparently the city, as a city, we really don't have a unified vetting process for all safety contractors, or for all city contractors. As a city, we must make every effort to fully vet our contractors and ensure that we are only contracting with companies that are forthright about their safety record and prioritize the safety of our workers and our community partners. The rest is, I will also be submitting a memoriam for William Young. I'll just be submitting. Thank you very much. Rest is submit.
Thank you,
you.
Supervisor.
Supervisor Yi, could you please add me as a co-sponsor to your hearing request on safety?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Next is Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. Colleagues, I'm introducing 3 resolutions today to retroactively authorize the District Attorney's Office to accept and expend 2 in-kind gifts from Code for America and the Urban Institute and 1 grant from the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. The Code for America gift will pilot a new approach to automated criminal record expungement for eligible convictions under Prop 64. The pilot addresses the fact that the communities who stood to benefit most from the expungement provisions of Prop 64 were the least able to afford an attorney in order to access the relief contemplated by the voters. The Urban Institute gift will fund creation of a justice dashboard to help manage and analyze and share data with key decision makers, the public, and San Francisco Sentencing Commission to support a reduction in incarceration rates and lower recidivism. The governor's grant will add over $500,000 to the elder abuse program. I hope my colleagues will support the 3 resolutions I am introducing today. They will help many of the most vulnerable in our communities and bring our justice system back to the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk, do I need to come down to the, off the?
No, Madam
Okay,
President.
all right, thank you. So, colleagues, today, for roll call for introduction, I want to share some exciting news. I'm thrilled to introduce a concept that will continually play out in the Dog Patch neighborhood build-out in that saga. The Dog Patch Public Realm Plan, which is an amendment to the general plan, and the reason why we are moving this forward is so that we can continue to build on the momentum that we have going on around the central waterfront. This plan, which was built over the last 18 months, working closely with District 10 residents and community groups, is a model for interagency coordination, a model for new partnerships, and how to serve our residents and our community as it continues to grow. Growth projections for the central waterfront could actually see as much as quadrupling housing units between the years 2020 and 2030, or it's also estimated to be 5 times the number of people living in the area. So one of the things that's important to notice is that public assets that make a complete neighborhood, such as adequate open space, such as safe streets, that they serve both industrial and residential demands, that they have not kept up with all of the growth that the neighborhood is experiencing. The Dog Patch Public Realm Plan allows the city to focus resources on making sure that dog patch streets, the sidewalks, making sure that the parks and other open spaces get high quality design and investment as they need. It includes designs for complete streets and open spaces developed in partnerships with the Department of Public Works, with SFMTA, the Port, and of course Rec and Park. I want to thank the residents of District 10 for being incredibly committed and engaged on this issue. I want to also thank and acknowledge the 5 community workshops. There's actually been a dozen of stakeholder group meetings and a number of surveys that have all come together to produce this plan. In particular, I want to thank the Dog Patch Neighborhood Association, the Green Benefit District, Toes and Paws, Potrero Boosters, Potrero Dog Patch Merchants Association, and a number of other committed individuals, specifically Bruce Huey and a few other individuals. I want to also thank Robin Abad and the Planning Department for their tremendous work on this legislation over the last several months. I also would like to recognize my legislative aide, Sophia Kittler, who's also been instrumental in shaping this legislation. I look forward to this public realm plan going through the legislative process. And Madam Clerk, the rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Fewer.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I'm introducing a hearing request to dive into our city's red carpet policies. I was absolutely shocked to learn that red lanes painted across the city could be used by tech shuttles, charter buses, and private transit vehicles. As San Francisco grapples with transit reliability in today's increasingly congested roadways, where public transit is already impacted by private vehicles and TNCs, the red lane needs to be a space where Muni isn't jostling with tech buses, medical shuttles, casino buses, or privatized buses and shuttles. Quite frankly, we do not know how many and what type of vehicles currently utilize the lanes and how they impact service at peak commuter times. Well, I know that the MTA board recently approved phase 1 of the Gary BRT with a commitment at looking at real-time data to gauge the impact of all types of buses. I hope this hearing
will be an opportunity to discuss the policy in terms of what should be allowed in red carpets lanes moving forward. We need to understand what effect these private buses have on Muni service before merely giving them access to our public infrastructure. There needs to be a discussion about how to prioritize red lanes as public infrastructure for both publicly owned and publicly operated transit. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Kim. Oh, okay. Supervisor Mandelman.
Submit.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Safai, you asked to be re-referred.
Yes, thank you. First, I'll start off with wanting to end the meeting in memoriam in honor of one of our long-term constituents, Velma Will. She went home on August 18th, 2018, 4 days after celebrating her 95th birthday, and she passed away in peace. She was raised in Louisiana, graduating from Dillard University in 1944, and immediately made her way out to San Francisco to find work and support the war effort. The city is where she met her husband, Cletus, settling down in Lakeview, OMI area of my district, and raising her family. Her daughter, Beverly, said her mother taught the family hard work and discipline, and Velma made sure their needs were fulfilled. Velma worked for the San Francisco Rec and Park Department for over 30 years, retiring in the mid-'80s. She was an active member of the OMI Neighbors in Action for over 30 years and constantly was advocating for peace and improving the overall environment in District 11. She's survived by her daughters Beverly, Diane, and her son Cletus. Services were held on Friday the 31st, and so we wanted to just end in her honor. So that's one. Second thing want to bring up is something that has been vexing the southern neighborhoods of San Francisco for the past 8+ years. Since the FAA changed the flight patterns and started using the next-gen system, they created a river effect of flights over the southern parts of San Francisco. Many of the neighbors that we've heard from in District 11, Excelsior, Outer Mission, Bernal Heights, Bayview Hunters Point, Portola, over in the Sunnyside, over in Sunset, all the kind of southern west of Twin Peaks have consistently had their homes barraged by airport noise. And this is unrelenting. I was the first member of this body to volunteer to be on the San Francisco Airport Advisory Board in over 8 years. I've sat through meetings where people are virtually losing their mind and their sanity. They come in tears. They come with distress. They come talking about how their children's lives have been disrupted and peacefulness has been disrupted. And our airport folks has put aside enough money to possibly upgrade and insulate maybe 10 homes in the entire peninsula area. So this is something that needs to be taken more seriously. So I'm calling for a hearing. I'd like the San Francisco Airport Commission, along with the leadership at the San Francisco Airport, along with the chair of the San Francisco Roundtable, and we've worked diligently with Congresswoman Jackie Speer. This is something that is near and dear to her office. We've worked with Congresswoman Pelosi's office. We've reached out to Senator Feinstein. This body and this industry is working with impunity. And it's very easy to think about adjusting flight patterns and spending a tiny little bit more money to go up and over San Francisco rather than right over. This is mainly about flight takeoffs, but other areas of the Bay are impacted by landings as well. Oakland Airport has been diverting flights over our city, and so people's sanity is at stake as well as their essential quality of life. So I want to have that hearing. I'm calling for that hearing to be done at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. I'd like it to be a joint hearing with the San Francisco Airport Commission. I'd like them to be invited to participate in this. I'd like it to be open to all the different districts. And I know that Supervisor Cohen had expressed concern about this. She's heard from her constituents. I know that Supervisor Ronan I've heard from constituents of Supervisor Yee and Supervisor Tang. Any other folks that have been impacted by this? It's mainly the southern and central part of San Francisco. I think I've heard from your constituents as well, Supervisor Mandelman. talking about airport noise. So we want to have a thoughtful conversation. We want to talk about not just generating income at the airport, but also how we're impacting people's lives and how we can have a thoughtful conversation about changing these flight patterns in an aggressive way. And I know that when I met with Congresswoman Spear last week. She said this is one of her highest priorities in dealing with this. Secondly, I'm calling for a hearing on the situation that's going on between We Drive You and Halcon Transportation, along with folks in the bargaining unit from the Teamsters Union. We put in place a number of years ago labor peace provisions as part of the transportation permits as shuttles are taking individuals to their workplace. Those provisions need to be upheld and respected. We heard through media outlets along with talking directly to the bargaining units that before even a strike was sanctioned, before even a strike was even on the table, these companies have hired scab employees in preparation of driving in exchange of the existing drivers. So we want to see how these the service disruption plan is being respected, the labor peace provisions of these permits are being respected, and we'd like to see some resolution to this overall dispute and the workers respected. So we'd also like that to happen within the next month at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, colleagues. I have, over my 8 years on the Board of Supervisors, participated in a network called the Young Elected Officials Network, which is a convening of young elected officials throughout our country. And this summer, this body is taking on a campaign to conduct review of firearm procurement practices throughout all of our jurisdictions to bring together our leveraging and purchasing power to ensure that the future purchases of firearms achieve the maximum benefit to our public taxpayers in terms of public safety. As Congress remains gridlocked on making our nation safer by enacting gun safety mechanisms and other legislation that would keep our men and women on our streets and also that serve our city and county safer, we have gotten very little traction. And so local elected officials are taking things in their own hands by using our leveraging and using our purchasing power to leverage influence over the companies that we actually purchase through in order to make the changes through the private sector. Throughout the summer, we have been doing research on how the city and county has opted to do business with different gun dealers for the procurement of our equipment. We have discovered that we purchase firearms made by Colt Manufacturing and Sig Sauer for our law enforcement agents through a variety of distributors, Allstate Police Equipment, Adamson Police Products, and Arms Unlimited. Throughout the time that we have done this research, we have realized that it's actually quite difficult to find how the city and county of San Francisco procures its arms, with who we do them for, and we also learned that none of these contracts come before any oversight body, including the Board of Supervisors, and in fact that we purchase guns not that differently from how we purchase Post-it notes. The unfortunate reality is as we purchase the very arms that are causing harm and danger on our streets, the reality is that we as a nation are facing an unprecedented epidemic of gun violence, shootings that claim tens of thousands of lives every year. And so our office is joining local, state, and other governmental bodies in the United States from California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin to send a letter to those that we purchase from this week and ask the following questions. What are the company's standards and criteria for selecting dealers authorized to sell company firearms? Do they have specific standards in terms of security, record keeping, employee training, and cooperation with law enforcement? How do these companies respond when one of their firearms is found to have been used in a crime? How do these companies use its federal crime gun trace results to evaluate dealers with whom they do business? And how do companies respond when gun traces show a pattern of disproportionate number of crime guns being sold by particular dealers? And would these companies work with us, public officials, and law enforcement agencies to establish a network of authorized dealers in the U.S. that maintain the highest standards in the following areas: employee training to detect straw buyers, record keeping of inventory and all transaction, security measures to deter gun theft, and education of buyers regarding gun safety, storage, and safety mechanisms, and a prompt and complete response in gun trace requests. We also want to work with these companies to undertake efforts to prevent its firearms from being stolen from distributors, transporters, or dealers, or from being sold or conveyed to individuals not legally permitted to own firearms. And we're asking these companies to establish, if they've not already done so, a gun repurchase or trade-in program that would reduce the number of its products sold secondhand on the internet and through private sales. And to also ask what safety products, i.e. trigger locks, if any, do these companies include with the guns sold in this country? Colleagues, I would love to, we will be distributing this letter to all of the offices this week, and we would love to have you sign on to this national campaign so that San Francisco can also participate in holding our gun manufacturers accountable when Congress has not. Thank you very much. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Madam President, seeing no other names on the roster, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So let's go back to items 16 through 19. Madam Clerk, could you call items 16 through 19?
Items 16 through 19 comprise the special order for a public hearing of persons interested in the certification of a final environmental impact report for the proposed Central Soma Plan issued by the Planning Commission on May 10, 2018. Items 17, 18, and 19 are the motions associated with that public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. So, colleagues, we have before us today four appeals of the final environmental impact report for the proposed Central Soma project, which is housed in District 6. Before considering these appeals, I'd like to give District 6 Supervisor Jane Kim an opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you, President Cohen. I will be asking colleagues today I will be making a motion to continue these items to the following week of September 11th. We did have a request specifically from one of the appellants to continue this item as today is the day after Labor Day, and folks wanted additional time.
All right, thank you. So, shall we take public comment on these items? I'll take a second on the motion to continue. Supervisor Yee has made a second on that motion to continue. Thank you. So we still need to take public comment at this time as to whether or not we can continue. So if there's any member of the public that'd like to come up and speak on items 16 through 19, please come on up to the podium. Just as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes of speak time, and you'll hear a soft chime indicating 30 seconds remaining on the balance of your time. The floor is yours. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Supervisors. David Wu with the South of Market Community Action Network. Just wanted to say that we're in support of the continuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? All right. Seeing none, public comment is closed. I have a motion to continue these. May I have a motion to continue the appeal made by Supervisor Kim and seconded by Supervisor Tang? Thank you. And the Board of Supervisors will hear this meeting on September 11th, 2018. Is that correct, Supervisor Kim? You're in agreement with that? Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk, let's go to the next special order.
Items 20 through 23 comprise the 3 p.m. special order for a hearing of persons interested in the approval of a final mitigated negative declaration under the California Environmental Quality Act for the Alcatraz Ferry Embarkment Project, affirmed on appeal by the Planning Commission on February 22nd, 2018, and issued on February 23rd, 2018. Items 21, 22, and 23 are the motions associated with that public hearing.
All right, so colleagues, we've got today an appeal for the proposed mitigated neg deck declaration. Our consideration of appeals involved our analysis of the adequacy, the accuracy, and the sufficiency and completeness of the mitigated negative declaration. So without objection, we will proceed as follows. First, we will have up to 10 minutes for the appellant to come and to describe the grounds of their appeal. That will be followed by a 2 minutes for public comment to speakers that are in support of the appeal, up to 10 minutes for representatives of the planning department to present their analysis for the mitigated neg deck declaration, and up to 10 minutes for the project sponsor. Up to 2 minutes for public commenters to speak in support of the affirmation of the mitigated negative declaration. And then, of course, finally, the appellant will have up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal argument. Colleagues, if we can take this, if we can move forward without objection. Thank you very much. All right, this hearing is now open. I'd like to acknowledge Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, and I just want to start by congratulating the National Park Service and the Port of San Francisco and the City of Sausalito for their work to deal with the City of Sausalito's concerns. The appeal, I think, for some technical reasons, because Sausalito wants to reserve their rights pending this board's actual approval of the Alcatraz contract as passed by the Port Commission, which will happen hopefully later this month. And also today I introduced and did not speak to during roll call for introductions that I've introduced a separate piece of labor harmony legislation that will help, pun intended, smooth the stormy seas in this matter. But so the appeal is still before us, and I think we'll briefly hear from the appellant. But as the chair of the County Transportation Authority, I can say that we are all committed here in San Francisco to working with our sisters and brothers over transportation issues in Marin and the city of Sausalito. And I'm very thankful that the Alcatraz contract is moving forward, and I want to congratulate the superintendent of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, Ms. Joss, for her work and her staff's work.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Peskin. All right, seeing no other names on the roster from any of the colleagues, I'll ask the appellant to come forward and make their presentation to present their case. Just as a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. My name is Mary Wagner. I'm the city attorney for the city of Sausalito. I think Supervisor Peskin summarized our position remarkably well, so I'll be very brief and just say that the changes to the project agreements that were approved by the Port Commission have addressed Sausalito's concerns that were outlined in our appeal letter. However, we are in a bit of this procedural catch-22 where we can't unconditionally withdraw our appeal because the project agreements aren't final until approved by the board, and the board can't take action on the project agreements until the appeal has been dealt with. That being said, Sausalito's mayor is really looking forward to coming to the hearing next week so that she can express the city's appreciation both to the Park Service, the Port Commission, and to this board in the hard work that's been done to get us to this resolution. And with that, I will answer any questions that the board may have, but our concerns have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing that there are no other names on the roster from questions from colleagues, I think we need to open up to public comment. Are there any members of the public that'd like to come and speak on this item? All right, seeing none, public comment is closed. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to pivot to the planning department now for their presentation. Again, 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, President Cohen and board members. I'm Julie Moore, Principal Environmental Planner on the Alcatraz Ferry Embarkation Project. Joining me are Joy Navarrete and Lisa Gibson, Environmental Review Officer. The item before you is an appeal of the final mitigated negative declaration, which I'll refer to as the CEQA document, prepared for the proposed Alcatraz Ferry Embarkation Project. As you've just heard, given Sausalito's current position, I'm not going to go into great detail in my appeal response. All of the information is summarized in your packet. So, in summary, Sausalito's concerns regarding transportation and public safety, there just simply are no significant environmental effects of the project. And we believe that the CEQA project description and project analysis are adequate, and that the appellant fails to provide any substantial evidence that would indicate the proposed project would have a significant impact on the physical environment, necessitating the preparation of an EIR. Rather, the CEQA document provides substantial evidence that there would be no significant impacts with implementation of the mitigation measures. Therefore, preparation of an EIR is not required. For these reasons, we recommend that the board uphold the final mitigated negative declaration, and that concludes my brief presentation. We'll be available for questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the appellant and the Planning Department for their brevity. I would like to move item 21, affirming the approval of the final mitigated negative declaration, and table items 22 and table item 23.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. That was quick and easy. All right, we'll take that motion, and it was seconded by Supervisor Ronan. Colleagues, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, without objection, passes.
I should also congratulate the Port of San Francisco and their Executive Director, Ms. Forbes, for their work. I neglected to do so earlier. Congratulations, Ms. Forbes.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Items 24 through 27 comprise the third special order today for a public hearing of persons interested in the certification of a conditional use authorization for a proposed project at 143 Corbett Avenue to legalize interior alterations and horizontal additions at the rear building walls, bay window, and decks, and the addition of a second unit within an existing single-family dwelling.
All right, thank you. So, colleagues, we have before us the conditional use authorization for the project at 143 Corbett Avenue, which is in District 8. Before considering this appeal, I'd like to give our colleague, Supervisor Raphael Mandelman, an opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam President. I and my office have been in conversations with the parties. There are some factual issues that I think would benefit from additional time spent with the Planning Department and building inspection. I also am hopeful that if we can get these parties into a room together, we may be able to work something out outside of this chamber. And so I'm going to be moving, I will move to continue this item until October 2nd.
All right, motion made by Supervisor Mandelman, second by Supervisor Peskin. And before I gavel down, let's take public comment. This is again public comment on the continuance. Is there any member of the public that'd like to comment? All right, seeing none, public comment is closed. And again, the motion to continue to the meeting of October 2nd, 2018. Is that right, Supervisor? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Madam Clerk, I've lost track of the agenda. Are we continuing?
Comment.
Public comment. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that favorite time of our agenda where we all come together and we listen. And are there any members of the public who'd like to come and address this board during general public comment? Please step forward, step in line. Please stand over here to the right of the chamber, to my left. Just as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes for public comment. You'll hear a soft chime indicating 30 seconds remaining on the balance of your time. Mr. Jones, welcome. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, board members. It is my understanding that there's a September 19th hearing, committee hearing, to address the issue of black city workers and how they're being mistreated. This would not need to happen if the San Francisco Human Rights Commission was doing its job. I'm sure we all know that the Human Rights Commission was formed in 1964 expressly to help fight discrimination against blacks at the time. And almost 50 years later, it was being directed by Teresa Sparks, a white transgender. She was sued by Thomas Willis, a subordinate, and the city settled for $210,000. Why did he sue? It was because she discriminated against him simply because he was a black heterosexual male. And I'm saying that it is outrageous that we have a Human Rights Commission that has, instead of helping the black community, has been indifferent to their issues. I think that it is reprehensible that this Teresa Sparks not only was not reprimanded for her conduct, but she was promoted 3 years later before she ultimately retired. This is outrageous treatment of the black community.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, President Cohen, supervisors. My name is Rachel Hayden. I'm the Executive Director of San Francisco Transit Riders. I'm here today to invite all of you to participate in San Francisco Transit Riders' third annual Transit Week. This week is all about celebrating public transit and all of those who ride it and drive it. It's the one time of year that our organization really works to bring together Muni riders, BART riders, Caltrain riders, and actually thank them for doing the right thing, which is keeping our air clean, keeping our streets safer, and really keeping the city moving. We have transit positive events the entire week, so this is September 24th to the 28th. But I'm here today to invite all of you to participate in our Transit Week challenge, which is to pledge to ride transit at least once every day during Transit Week. I also would like to invite each of you to participate Monday morning, September 24th, in a ride-along with your constituents. So we'll meet at a transit stop in your district, and we'll ride along to the steps of City Hall, where we will have a kickoff event. So I have the pledges, and I'm going to go ahead and send them around. Supervisor Brown, if you could pass them along. I want to go ahead and thank Supervisor Brown has already pledged. Supervisor Mandelman, thank you so much. And Supervisor Peskin, I've been working with your staff to reserve the steps of City Hall. So thank you so much. If you could please, if you are going to participate with us this year, I ask that you sign and either scan or send it back to me by September 7th, actually. And I really look forward to participating in Transit Week with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Peter Dreckmeyer. Just wanted to start off with a quick pop quiz. Where does our water come from? Correct. You're thinking Hetch Hetchy. That's mostly correct. We did a survey back in the spring. We found that 75% of San Franciscan voters could identify Hetch Hetchy as the source of their water, but only 12% could identify the true source, which is the river that feeds Hetch Hetchy, and that is the Tuolumne River. My name is Peter Dreckmeyer. I'm the Policy Director of the Tuolumne River Trust. And our survey showed a really strong commitment to the environment in San Francisco. 93% of San Franciscans conserved water during the recent drought. Of those, 94% cited the environment as a motivating factor, with 71% saying it played a major role. 97% support for San Francisco Bay, and 92% support for protection and restoration of the Tuolumne River, even though people didn't know it was the source of their water. So Tuolumne is a really special river. It drains the northern half of Yosemite National Park, one of the great national parks, maybe the great national park. There's a world-class whitewater run just downstream of Yosemite. The upper 83 miles of the Tuolumne are now wild and scenic as of 1984, and back then the SFPUC did not support wild and scenic status, but the Board of Supervisors did, so thank you to your predecessors for that. The Tuolumne also provides water for 200,000 acres of prime farmland in Stanislaus County and for 2.7 million people in the Bay Area. It's a very hard-working river. Only 20% reaches its confluence with the San Joaquin. We are now working on the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, trying to restore and revive the Bay Delta and the Tuolumne River. Would love your engagement. The Board of Supervisors in the past has done a lot to support the cause. There was a resolution in 2008 to support moving forward the water system improvement program without diverting more water from the Tuolumne, and I'm out of time. I'd love to work with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Will Hinshaw, born and raised in the Bay Area. I live in San Francisco. I'm a renter, and I want to speak on one aspect of Prop 10 that I think is covered by, it is covered by Prop 10, vacancy control. I think it's going to be very costly to the city and bad for the tenants in the long run. The city will have to create a new division of the rent board to manage landlord vacancy reporting and control, costly and time consuming. Value of apartment buildings, rent controlled buildings especially, and residential income property is in large part determined by current income and future income. Putting vacancy control in place would immediately eliminate hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in San Francisco real estate value, because it reduces the possibility of increase in rents over time and as rent control tenants leave units. Reducing property values in this way would seriously reduce the city's annual tax revenues from apartment sales and the sale of other residential income properties, such as single-family homes that don't currently fall under rent control but may under Prop 10. I'd also ask you to consider Berkeley before Costa-Hawkins was put in place. Landlords were required to rent units for an amount determined by the city, vacancy control, and many landlords ended up charging that number on paper, while the vast majority would give preferential selection to prospective tenants who offered them cash under the table in an effort to secure living arrangements in a market that has reduced supply. This would put financially challenged renters at an even greater disadvantage than they already are, and this under the table cash is money that could be taxed by the city in the form of market rents. Also, let's see, Berkeley's housing supply was in shambles by the end of vacancy control because there is no financial incentive for landlords to upgrade the units. So you'd be left with a housing supply that is limited as well as decaying. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
All right, by now you know good and well how I am in speaking up for other people that's most vulnerable and on the receiving end of discriminatory practices, and also the way I speak up for females. This time I got to speak up for females that happens to be the big boss, understand me. And I'm representing and speaking up for her on the grounds that she's a target of the U.S. Attorney General and the United States Federal District Court. I'm talking about you, Bree. You've already completed the first set of requirements and elements in order to sustain a RICO Act, corrupt and organized enterprise complaint against yourself and people who's agreeing with you for that safe injection site. You made a press conference and gave an announcement on what you want to do. Then you completed the next step by going to Glide Memorial Church, showing the booth and the location where you're going to have addicts use an illegal drug, narcotic that's called heroin. You further completed that step by using the paraphernalia and the drugs that you are financing to supply for the addict. SF viewer, please. By doing this, I'm speaking up for you on the grounds that that's illegal in violation of federal law. Here's the front page of additional information explaining how you're in violation of law that took place in 1986, where you're running a drug house. This section here explains that you're eligible to be put in a federal penitentiary for 20 years, and by the same response, you're eligible for a $500,000 fine for each individual and a $2 million additional fine for running a corrupt and organized enterprise. That's called the RICO Act. I don't want to see you go out like that. And as a result, I move to have you consult with both city attorneys pertaining to civil law and criminal law. That's Gascon and Herrera, to get a stipulation to advise the document.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
My name is Maina Young. I'm a longtime San Francisco resident and a homeowner. Just want to let you know that the true numbers in San Francisco for rental market has been going down. The 390,000 units and 40,000 currently in the census, that says that unoccupied, and that's been increased from 36,000 a couple of years ago. The reason why is because of the unreasonable rent regulation in San Francisco. With the Prop 10, I can trust that the liberal politicians here will make sure that more of the rental units will be taken out of the market. The 1995 legislation helped to restore some units, flexibility in rental. Looking at Berkeley before 1995, and you'll see that a lot of the dilapidated properties were out there, and now they're getting better. So we don't want to go back to the way it was, and Costa-Hawkins has been able to help us restore some housing supply. So please say no to Prop 10. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Govia. I want the supervisor to say no on Proposition 10 because the property owner also need to protest, not only for the renter. Please say no to Proposition 10.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Winnie Fong, and I'm a small property owner. And I understand, like both sides pretty tense now. And before I rent my house out, and I didn't feel that way because I rented to, I treat them right. They treat me very nicely. And now the rent regulation is getting worse and worse. And my daughter, even I gave a place for them to live there for free. They said, Mom, I want to get my house back. They took it back in February because they don't want to get tough rent regulations. And they said, I worked so hard to get my house and try to help me out, something. But I want to go out to work again. And you help me babysit. I'm retired already. So also my son already planned it this September, going to take his place back because of regulation. Because also they think the Costa-Hawkins and might cause them more headache and more trouble, and now lots of lawsuit. They feel like it's not fair and now punish. We have a place try to help ourselves, help the tenant, and we feel like we pay the tax, and we feel right now the regulations on tenant side, and we don't want to be punished as a small property owners. We provide the place for tenants, and not every owners are bad. And I hope every of you think about the owners' side too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
It is absolutely impossible that man should have written the Bible. In the book of Leviticus, there's a command by God Almighty that they were to let the land rest every seventh year. Think about that. If man wrote the Bible, why would he make a law like that? God promised a triple crop to take care of the seventh year, the eighth year, and the ninth year. It's impossible. Now, there's 47 words that the prophet Enoch is recorded to have said, and it still hasn't been fulfilled, but it will be. He said this, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. You talk about what you are interested in, and on Judgment Day the basis of the judgment will be not only the actions and the motives, but the actual words that are spoken. I was telling the officer back there, mark my word, something big time is going to happen April 20th. Okay? It has been 8,202 days from the end of the times of the Gentiles and the start of the 40th Jubilee from Christ. 2,001 days later was 9/11. Okay? That's what it was. Next week will be 9/11. It was the sixth trumpet. And I certainly speculate that it'll be 6,430 days from 9/11 till Judgment Day, or something really, really big for the kingdom of God. Now, I think that I should be listened to because, as far as I know, I'm the only man that can look back at an event that I predicted that actually came to pass. I made this statement 30.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
My name is Jane Lee.
Ma'am, please speak directly into the mic. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Supervisor, my name is Jane Lee. Please save save housing. No on public 10, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Sonia Ng. Today I'm here. I represent many hardworking property owner landlord because they had working to make money to pay for high property tax and bonds. We want you say no Proposition 10, save cost Hagens. The property owner landlord not win the lotto buy the property. We work very hard. When we young, we work 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we save money to buy the property for our retirement. More ridiculous rent control will make more housing crisis worse and worse. So please save cost Hagens. Say no for Proposition 10. This is our property right because the ridiculous housing law make us the property right away. So please, we working together so the housing crisis not continue make the ridiculous rent control law. So please vote no Proposition 10. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Supervisor. My name is Jian No. I'm a small property owner. And so many years, we've been very good relationship with all the tenants, But ever since those regulations come out, there are crisis on the housing, rental market, everything. We are treating, I'm thinking of you guys treating us like the communism party, and punish those hardworking people, benefit those lazy people. Those people, they don't want to work. Even if they are work that amount, they said they need to pay certain tax. If they don't have the money, they get the house, the housing benefit from the government, the medical, everything. How can we work so hard and be still, forced by those rental laws? Those are those ridiculous rental regulations. So please, save Costa Hawkins, save the rental market. No on Proposition 10, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Christine Pelosi, and I'm here on behalf of Proposition 10, which gives us an opportunity to take a look at housing as a human right. Now, you've just heard a few things about your constituents. You've heard that they are lazy, that they don't want to work, that they are demonizing homeowners, that they are taking away the rights of property owners if they want to pay fair market value for their rentals. So either you think of housing as a human right or you don't. Either you want local control or you want Sacramento to control what we do through Costa Hawkins. Either you stand with the men and women of organized labor here the day after Labor Day who have voted overwhelmingly to endorse Proposition 10 with the California Democratic Party that voted nearly unanimously in July to endorse this, and the many, many, many renters and property owners who have said we want local control. We want local decisions to be made. The minute this proposition passes, and I believe it will pass, what do we know is going to happen? Well, first of all, we're going to go to court because that's what happens in America. And we're going to talk about the fair return to the landlord, which is important. And for those who own rental properties, obviously a concern that you should make improvements on your property and have compensation in the form of the rent you're allowed to charge. However, to say that in this day and age, when our increasing homeless population is pushed out due to higher unaffordable rents, that we shouldn't take a local San Francisco specific solution to the problem, I think is to take a tool out of our arsenal. So I would recommend a yes vote on Prop 10 and a very thoughtful conversation about what we can do here in San Francisco locally to solve the housing crisis, because I do believe, as I hope you do too, that housing is a human right. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
I second what that woman said. And I'm 100% behind Mayor Breed trying to find safe injection sites somehow, some way. The city kind of needs it. Let's bring our government back home. 10 years ago, I started rolling into this building the last year of the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, and 4 or 5 young adults spoke about reducing the amount of alcohol-to-go stores in the 6th and Mission area. They spoke very well, better than I ever will. They got their way. Last session here, a month ago, July 31st, Supervisor Peskin represented Chinatown, saying we don't want any more dispensaries. Supervisor Safaye said the same. That's what he was supposed to do. And President Cohn decided to change her vote. And I thought that was a nice way of doing business in this room. Last week also, at public comment, a young woman spoke and said she was against hiring 200 police officers. We need crisis intervention teams, and I should have said I second her motion. The problem with crisis intervention teams is we don't know where to hire them. We have to create them. A diploma may not give that to you. We need people that can talk down, natural talent maybe, or a diploma that can talk down people in emotional crisis, mental crisis, whatever. And finally, the American Legion. For the first time in my life, I want to give a big shout out. For the first time, somebody in the veterans in this country stuffed a sock in President Trump's mouth and made him back. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Madam Carvillo. Good afternoon, President Cohen, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Winship Hillier. Prior to the intercession, I spoke to you about a Supreme Court case decided in 1990, Washington versus Harper. In that case, as I said, the majority opinion was that Leon Harper did not have a due process right to refuse the involuntary administration of antipsychotic medication because he was a prisoner and for no other reason. Now I'd like to read to you from Justice Stevens's dissent in that decision. But let me remind you, the majority ruled the way it did because a prison is an inherently violent institution, and antipsychotic medication was viewed as essential to controlling that violence. Here's what Justice Stevens' dissent says. Forcing psychotropics on Harper also provoked counterproductive behavior, e.g., ID, Book 8, December 16, 1982, report of Dr. Petrick that Harper's assault on a male nurse and damage to a television were, quote, in the context of his complaining about the medication side effects. Overall, the issue of involuntary medications and side effects is a major issue in his management, end quote. Semicolon, ID, Book 8, October 7, 1983. Therapists report that Harper had indicated, quote, that he is going to destroy unit property until the medications are stopped. He has recently destroyed the inmate's stereo as an example of this. This what Justice Stevens is trying to say is that antipsychotic medication causes violent behavior. It does not control it. And his point has since been borne out, I think, to everyone's satisfaction in the MacArthur risk analysis study that showed that, in fact, though I think not to a scientific level of certainty. Madam Corvillo.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. And before the speaker begins, if there are any other members of the public who would like to address the board during general public comment, please line up.
Hi, good afternoon, every supervisor. And my name is Jifen Mao. I'm living in San Francisco. I'm a small property owner. I want to talk everybody now. We are a small property owner is work very hard, and we need pay the housing property tax a lot. Right now the housing is need fix a lot, and the tax a lot. We are work very hard. I want us say to save the cost hagen and no property turn. Please, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Wendy Wong from San Francisco Coalition for Good Neighborhoods. Thank you so much, Supervisor Paskin, to help the Chinatown to get free marijuana in the small community. And also thank you all the supervisors' support. In terms of the housing crisis, Supervisor Tang is trying to help the mayor to have the access drilling unit. I understand that we have good intention to help housing crisis, especially to release the rental units, especially in in-law. However, we need to face the root cause why we don't have enough applicants to get this application moving forward. It's not the process, it's the law that is not protecting the landlords. When we are putting the 2-room downstairs, it costs at least $170,000 for a decent unit. That, why we are putting the money into a lawsuit, potentially lawsuit, yet we don't have law to protect landlords who has reasonable rate of return, and also they put their savings into their in-law to supply additional housing. We have 30 to 40,000 units available, but then we do not feel comfortable of renting it out because we get lawsuit after lawsuit, and we have $5,800,000 to help tenants only, but the landlords who are mom and pop store owners do not have any legal advisors, and they have, Supervisor Kim did mention something, $350,000. This is only one half of the lawsuit that is already drained the whole resources. So please put no on Proposition 10 because it will create more housing crisis and it stops supplies of the developers coming to San Francisco. And San Francisco will become old and filthy town. There's no developers want.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. Yes, if you stand at the other microphone. Okay.
My name is Seng Pin Lin. I live in San Francisco. 我反對呢個cost hacking.
I oppose Proposition 10, which is a repeal of Costa-Hawkins.
因為我嚟到美國超過30年。
I'm here in U.S. more than 30 years.
我帶住2個仔女辛勤勞動超過30年。
I have 3 children and I'm working hard in the last 30 years.
我係個小業主。
I'm a small property owner.
我有屋出租物業嘅。
I have a rental unit.
即係我做工做到超過65歲退休。
I work until 65 years and get retired now.
即係我嘅辛勤勞動咧，就而家係一個小業主，佢而家呢個三藩市咧反對嗰個 取消嗰個 cost cooking，我就反對。
I opposed to repeal the Costa-Hawkins.
同埋咧反對市府嘅租控。
I also opposed the restricted rent control in San Francisco.
反對市府用580萬嚟一邊倒支持免費律師嚟控告啲小業主。
I opposed the city to use the public funds $5.8 million to support tenants only to sue landlords.
我希望市府有一個公平嘅法律。
I hope the city has fair laws.
即係大家平衡，有580萬免費律師支持嗰啲住客咧，一樣要返580萬支持免費律師支持我哋啲小業主。
We need free legal advice to landlord as well to balance it out.
我就反對呢個我就 say 呢個 cost hawking say housing。
So I oppose the Proposition 10 and try to save the Costa-Hawkins.
No on 10.
No Proposition 10.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
He will try his best to speak on his own, but if there's anything I can help.
Good afternoon, all supervisor. I'm Ken La. I'm the San Francisco owner. Last week was a holiday, Labor Day holiday, but I still have to work for the last 3 days. The reason I work for the last 2 days because I want to help one of the single mother with 4 years kid. They have no place to live because they have the family problem. So I want to clean it and let them to move in as soon as possible. Not that mean I want to get a few more days of rent because they have no place to live. That's why I want to help them. We would like to work with the tenant, and also we would like tenant work with the owner, and also same as all supervisor. I want all of you work with us, tenant and owner. Thank you. And also hope no on Proposition 10 and Costa-Hawkins. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to address the board during general public comment? Madam President.
All right, Madam Clerk, seeing that there are no other members of the public that would like to address this body during general public comment, I'm going to close public comment at this time. Madam Clerk, could you please call the adoption without committee reference calendar?
Yes, items 30 through 34 were introduced for adoption without reference to committee. A unanimous vote is required for a resolution on first reading today. Alternatively, a supervisor may require a resolution to go to committee. Item 30 is on second appearance, so it is no longer unanimous. It will just need a vote of 8.
All right, thank you. I believe Supervisor Peskin will speak to that. Supervisor Peskin, your name's on the roster.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to sever item 30.
Okay, thank you. Any other members would like to sever any other items? All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the remaining balance.
On items 31 through 34, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
Aye.
Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Thank you very much. Without objection, these items pass unanimously. Madam Clerk, could you please go back to item 30?
Item 30 is a resolution to support California State Proposition 10, the Affordable Housing Act, on the November 6, 2018 ballot, and to reaffirm the city's support for repeal of the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act.
Thank you, and I'd like to recognize Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues, and thank you for indulging consideration of this matter, which I actually think is the most important measure other than maybe Proposition 6 that we just voted for, the gas tax repeal, that is before California voters this November. And by way of background, Prop 10, which was actually put on by popular signature, hundreds of thousands of signatures throughout the state of California, would repeal what I think was one of the more egregious preemptions of local prerogatives, the Costa-Hawkins Act that was passed in 1995, and for over 20 years has deprived cities of the ability to even discuss potential tools to deal with local housing crises, particularly in San Francisco, where 2/3 of our residents are renters. And I say that as a small, proud landlord with rent-controlled properties in the city and county of San Francisco. I know there is concern about vacancy decontrol, but Costa-Hawkins does many, many other things. It limits the period of time to which rent control can apply. So cities that would like to extend rent control beyond a certain date cannot do so because of Costa-Hawkins. It really limits local cities and counties from being able to implement a host of tools. And I want to reiterate that a vote for Prop 10 is not necessarily a vote for expanding rent control or instituting vacancy control. And while I happen to believe that rent control really builds stronger and more stable communities by keeping tenants in place and is humane, repealing Costa-Hawkins in and of itself doesn't mean that rent control will suddenly expand. What it means is we can start to have conversations that heretofore we've not been able to have for 23 years. So I commend it to you. I think it is remarkably important. I think we are a responsible public policy body, and if Prop 10 passes, we can start sophisticated deliberations with the property owner community, with the tenant community, and come up with some, I think, very good fixes here locally in San Francisco. You'll hear from Supervisor Kim about one of the most pernicious aspects of Costa-Hawkins, and if that does not get you to vote to support Prop 10, I don't know what will. I'll yield the floor to Supervisor Kim.
Supervisor Tang is next on the roster.
Thank you very much. And I actually absolutely agree with Supervisor Peskin in that I think a conversation on this topic is actually very important. And in fact, that is why I supported the previous resolution before this proposition even qualified for the ballot back then. That was before this Board of Supervisors. Given that, though, and now that Proposition 10 has qualified, and knowing the district that I represent, it has been a very challenging conversation, especially as someone who has benefited from rent control as a tenant. I have cringed when I have even received rent increases of $50 a month, and I can't even imagine what people go through when they see their rent increase by thousands of dollars. However, in my role, I have to separate myself, personal experiences, from my role as a supervisor. And one of the things that I come across regularly over the course of the years as a supervisor is that when I ask people, why are you not creating an in-law unit in your home, an accessory dwelling unit? Why are you not doing this or doing that? The answer I always get is, can you please change rent control? And I say, well, I cannot do that. But that is, unfortunately, one of the number one reasons for why this is a deterrent for many of the small property owners, especially in my district, why they don't even put units out on the rental market in the first place. So I think that we are missing out on opportunities for potential rentals because of some of the fears, whether founded or not, on rent control and how they would apply if you were to, say, legalize in-law units. But also, I think that just speaking to what Supervisor Peskin said, is that some of the details are not in place yet, and I think that also causes a bit of concern for some of the residents that I do represent, which is that they don't know if Costa-Hawkins or rent control will apply to single-family homes moving forward or not, whether there might be a mass wave of evictions for small property owners who do have tenants and who are concerned about the future. So unfortunately, I won't be able to support it today, but not, again, because I don't personally support rent control or that I don't believe that there should be a dialogue around this. I absolutely think there should be, but given the district that I come from and represent, I think I do need to take this position today on this particular resolution.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I have supported Proposition 10, long supported Proposition 10, and do believe that we need to overturn the Costa-Hawkins state legislation. And that belief was only further consolidated for me a few days ago when my friend, a mere 20 days after the passing of his spouse, received a letter from the lawyer representing his landlord stating exactly this. Dear Mr., let me start by offering my and my client's condolences on the loss of your wife. We know this must be a difficult time for you and sincerely wish you well. Due to her passing, the ownership has the right to establish a new rental amount for your unit under a state law known as the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. With regret, this letter serves to provide you with the attached Notice to Establish Terms of Tenancy, which establishes the rental amount to increase by $1,146.54 starting on December 1st, 2018. We apologize for the formality of this notice, which is required by law. We are confident the long period of time between the date of this notice and the date upon which the new rent takes effect will be helpful to you. Please let us know if you need any repairs and maintenance. It is with regret, under the circumstances of your wife's passing, that the owners serve you this notice. We trust you understand. I cannot express the rage that I and many of our friends felt a mere 20 days after the passing of his spouse, that a landlord would send a letter such as this, which is legal under state law. And I think in many ways we have moved in a direction where a ruthless economy, which benefits the few, is taken over the common welfare of the greater community. I think there are a number of things that we must do to protect landlords, and I certainly understand that it is a two-way street. But I think that Costa-Hawkins overreaches in terms of how it has impacted so many of our constituents and friends. This is only one example of a letter that I saw a few days ago. But I think that we have countless stories that display how difficult the state law has made for so many of our families, our constituents, to continue living in the city that they love. And we have seen the ruthlessness of this law used to displace members from their communities, near their workplace, increasing congestion, away from their communities, from places of support. And I think it's incredibly important that the state of California in this housing and affordable housing crisis take a strong stand to overturn Costa-Hawkins this November. So I hope that this board is able to support this as we move forward. I think that many members of this board would be the first to stand up to say that we need to create balanced legislation at the local level that both protects tenants and landlords, but it doesn't have to be this. And Costa-Hawkins has frankly hampered any of our abilities to create a law that would fairly protect tenants and landlords. So colleagues, I hope that we can all support this resolution today.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Safai.
Thank you, and I appreciate the conversation today. I think it's very thoughtful. I think this is not an easy issue. We're dealing with a lot of different multitude of factors when trying to approach this issue. I heard a lot of the public comment, but I also take to heart what Supervisor Kim's reading. I mean, that's a gut-wrenching situation to be in a situation that you've just lost a spouse to receive a rent increase. It's almost like being kicked in the gut or spit in your face. I mean, that is despicable. And I am a supporter of rent control. I think that we need to amend Costa-Hawkins. I think it is something that has hampered our ability. But at the same time, there is a lot of consternation and concern in my district. We have 70% of my district is owner-occupied single-family homes. Those individuals are mainly, that is the only asset they have. A lot of elderly aging in place. They are house rich but cash poor, and oftentimes will make the decision to have informal relationships where they have in-laws or elderly individual. A lot of them are women, will move to the downstairs and rent the upstairs. And then even if they do a home, for instance, this is an extreme example, but the lady across the street was 96 years old when she passed away. There were 3 siblings. They did not want to sell the home, and they chose to rent it. It was the first time in 58 years it had been open to any other person than their family, but they chose to rent that. And what worries me about this conversation when it pertains to single-family homes is a lot of these families will choose not to participate in the rental market. Now, a single-family home in my district rents for around $3,500 to $4,000 a month, still extremely high, but comparable to a one-bedroom in some of the districts in other parts of the city. And so it is affordable mainly for families and multitude of people. I worry that that option would be taken off the table. I worry that people would not and do not formalize the in-laws in the district because of the worry of rent control being applied on a single-family home. So for all those reasons, I personally have not taken a position on Proposition 10. I think this resolution is premature, and so I will not be voting in support of it today.
Supervisor Peskin? I'm sorry. Yeah, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam.
Wait, I'm sorry. Peskin, you've already spoken.
I'll
let
defer
me address
to Supervisor
Ronan, and then we'll get back to you.
I just wanted to add my voice to this discussion, and I appreciate the way that Supervisor Peskin framed the discussion in the beginning, because while I am a big proponent of rent control and believe that some form of vacancy control does need to happen if Prop 10 eventually passes, Costa-Hawkins goes above and beyond vacancy control. And I just wanted to add a couple examples that I've dealt with while I've been on the board, either as a legislative aide or now as a supervisor. When the former Supervisor Campos tried to increase relocation payments for tenants that were evicted under the Ellis Act, one of the issues that came up in that case, and the law was eventually overturned in the courts, was that Costa-Hawkins didn't allow the board to set a appropriate relocation assistance amount so that people really could have a chance to continue living in San Francisco after being evicted oftentimes from their apartment of decades. Another example is a piece of legislation that's before us right now that would prevent landlords from, grossly increasing rents, sometimes 100, 200, 300% in single-family homes, because Costa-Hawkins would prevent us from doing so. We're going ahead with that law, but in a much milder form because of Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins' breadth and the way that it impacts our ability to protect tenants in the city is endless. I mean, I think we've pushed it in every creative direction that we can as a city, because we have so many renters that are being pushed out, and it is such a crisis every single week. And I kid you not, still every single week I have tons of emails right now about it. When units or buildings are put up for sale in my district, the tenants are terrified because they know that that's just the first step from their being kicked out and displaced from their home and the neighborhood and the city that they love. And we have to be able to do more to protect our residents, and we should have that ability. And what Proposition 10 will do is it will just allow us to start that conversation and to strike that right balance between protecting tenants and protecting landlords. We can have that robust discussion, which will happen here, and it'll be one of those discussions where we're battling it out to the very end. But we need to have that, and we can't have it until Proposition 10 passed. So I appreciate you sponsoring this resolution, Supervisor Peskin, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes, thank you. I signed on to Proposition 10 just because of when I first came on, and I really was looking at it and studying it. And I just felt like it was the right thing to do because over my 10 years of being on as a legislative aide, I can't tell you how many times I have fought to try to keep people in their places, to keep renters from being evicted, wrongly evicted, or their rents going up, or going into a unit that was previously, a decent price, and then they knew that because they were their friend's unit, and then coming in and having it at a price that they would not be able to afford. I think what this does, I think, as Supervisor Peskin had said, it unties our hands so we can sit down with people, with property owners, small property owners, with the tenants, and really try to find what we can do. It's not always a stick. We could also look at things that are carrots, that maybe to bring people to be able to rent out their units, rent them out for fair market or a fair value where people can afford to live in the city. I just think it's really important that we look at securing people that are renting and are vulnerable. I feel it's just so important, and I feel like this gives us a pathway to do that. It doesn't say we're going to come down hard with the stick to every landlord. It means it gives us a pathway to have these discussions where we haven't been able to in the last 23 years without getting sued. Everything that we've done, we've been sued. And this way, it gives us a chance. So I just want to reiterate my support for this.
Supervisor Mandelman.
I come at this as a former local government lawyer. I remember a number of years where Costa-Hawkins made it impossible for local governments to enact inclusionary housing ordinances to regulate the rents as a portion of market rate developments, which is something that I think most of us in this room think, of course, local governments should be able to do. And it took an act of the state legislature and a signature of the governor to allow local governments to do that. I think, if Proposition 10 passes, we will have a difficult conversation about a number of issues. It is worth noting that prior to Costa-Hawkins, this board was not able, the city was not able to enact vacancy control. I don't know whether there is a form of vacancy control that the city will be able to enact after Proposition 10, but I do know that Sacramento has no business telling us that we cannot protect the spouses of people whose spouses have died, and has no business telling us what type of inclusionary housing we can adopt. So I think this is actually a relatively easy question for a local government official, and I think that we should be supporting the repeal of Costa-Hawkins.
Supervisor Fewer.
Yes, thank you very much. As Supervisor Tang said, at the district she represents, in my district, 65% of my constituents are renters. And I have the second most evictions in San Francisco. And and I want to say also, I joined the ranks of Supervisor Peskin. I also am a landlord and a small property owner. And so I understand that there is a tension between the small property owners, as we heard today, but there is also a very big difference between large property owners that own 250 apartment buildings and those that own 2. And so I think with Proposition 10, if it were to pass, it would allow us to have those types of conversations, which we are not even able to have today. When they talk about, when the small property owners come forward and they speak, I understand their fear of it, and I understand their frustration, but however, there is no remedy that we can even discuss if we still have Costa-Hawkins. Our hands are tied. And I just think that with every municipality, we have a different issue around affordability and about the housing crisis. And it just so happens that San Francisco is suffering under a huge, huge housing crisis. And so, but yet we do have, I think, landlords that own 250 apartment buildings, and how is that situation different from somebody who owns 2 or 3 buildings, such as Supervisor Peskin and myself? So I am in support of this resolution, and actually proud to be a co-sponsor with Supervisor Peskin, because I do believe that it's time San Francisco had control over our own policies, and the state does not dictate what we need here and how we can have this conversation between landlords and small property owners and also the tenants. And this is a town where the majority of people our tenants. And I do think that housing is a human right. And I do think that it's been too long that our hands have been tied and we have not been able to even have a conversation about this and to remedy some of our housing crisis issues, but also to acknowledge that what we're doing isn't working right now and that we need to actually have a conversation on how we can fix it. So I want to thank Supervisor Peskin for bringing this forward, and I am a proud co-sponsor, and I ask my colleagues to join me in this vote because I actually think as legislators of San Francisco, it is our job to legislate, and it is our job to legislate locally. And when something binds our hands that we cannot do that, then we need to fight that because we are responsible to the constituents of San Francisco.
Mr. President, before you get acknowledged, I actually wanted to step off the dais and ask Supervisor Yee to come and so I can come and ask you some questions. Is that okay? And then you'll be able to speak. Thank you, Supervisor Yee. All right. Good afternoon. I've listened to a lot of discussion, and I actually first want to point out something. This is the reason why items like this need to go to committee, so that we can have this debate in a very thoughtful way. For me, it feels very rushed. We're coming off a vacation, and we're just now starting to get into this. And this is the first time we've actually had a long conversation about it. And I just have some more clarifying questions. And let me just give you a little bit of profile, right? So I represent the southeastern part of San Francisco, as you know. You may not know, but it's the highest African-American home ownership. And this is a community that's also aging in place. And I hear real concerns about their foundation changing. I hear concerns about can they afford to live in San Francisco, just how the city is changing all around them. The other fact that I want to help put out there for the profile is that it's the second largest, the District 10 has the second largest home ownership in San Francisco, over 60% of home ownership. So for me, it's a matter of clarity. I'm just trying to understand how this impacts homeowners. I have a clear understanding of how it helps apartment and rent-controlled apartments, but I'm hesitant to be. I'm frustrated because I'm in a position to have to make a decision, and frankly, it's just a resolution. It's just a statement saying that we're support or opposed to something. But really, what does this? Is there any analysis, is there any study on how this impacts really vulnerable communities? And I'm thinking, I mean, you've been in San Francisco, all of you on this body have been in San Francisco a long time and know the state of the African American community, the Samoan community, just really vulnerable communities that have been in San Francisco and are just barely holding on, just trying to survive, as well as new community members, largely Chinese, monolingual Chinese speakers and Spanish speakers. And so I'm not clear as to how a supportive vote for Proposition 10 positively affects my constituents. So I will put it back out there, Supervisor Kim. I know maybe it's clear for you, but it's just not that clear for me. And I understand how it changes the dynamics and the conversation with large property owners. But again, I'm coming from a community where there are small property owners whose, frankly, retirement plans are contingent on their home ownership, and love to just to better understand it. Thank you. Anyone can speak to it.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you. If I may, through the acting president to Supervisor Cohen, attempt to respond. And let me preface it by actually acknowledging the work of former Supervisor David Chu, who actually introduced repeal of Costa-Hawkins in the state legislature, but let's call it the way it is, due to the extraordinary lobbying powers of the real estate industry. He did not succeed. And so, as happens when legislators fail to legislate and there is a need, people went to the court of last resort, and that was the initiative process, and that's how Prop 10 ended up on the ballot. But I think to put it in local San Francisco historical terms, and I don't say this pejoratively, but the late Angelo San Giacomo, who in the 1970s owned thousands and thousands of units, did an across-the-board large rent hike, which, I mean, it was the kind of the classic displaced, people of all colors and of all ages, and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and even Mayor Dianne Feinstein at that time supported creating a rent control law in the city of San Francisco. And as that became more popular, the real estate industry basically went to Sacramento and passed Costa-Hawkins, which was sweeping in its preemption of local government's ability. To the exact question that you are asking, to a single-family homeowner, none of this really means anything, right? Because if you live in your home, you're really not affected by Costa-Hawkins, you're not affected by rent control, but relative to the community and the stability of the community and surrounding neighborhoods that have a mix of tenants and rental properties, having rent control has been really a lifeline to the most vulnerable communities and communities of more means, particularly in a time when, I have to say as a small landlord, it is when I see what you can rent a unit for, it's almost embarrassing. These are windfalls that are being made by, small property owners, large property owners. But if Costa-Hawkins was repealed, the kind of instance that Supervisor Kim just addressed, we could deal with, I'm sure, by unanimous vote of this board that the spouse, the widow, would not be able to have a massive rent increase. We've had to do Costa-Hawkins workarounds, and Supervisor Tang is very familiar with this, in order to do accessory dwelling units. That's why we have to have Costa-Hawkins contracts. The breadth of what Costa-Hawkins does in the face of a housing crisis is unconscionable. I have to salute Assemblymember Chu, who took a run at it in the state legislature. I put it on the adoption without committee reference calendar not because I wanted to put anybody on the spot. I honestly thought it was going to be like Proposition 6 that we just passed unanimously without comment. I just thought it was just going to be easy peasy. If San Francisco can't stand up for it, I don't know what city can. But I guess if we don't have the votes here today, I guess we'll send it to committee and bring it back and vote on it again, I guess.
Supervisor Kim?
Colleagues, I just wanted to add my words as well. First of all, I think most of us are very familiar with the state law because we grapple with it several times a year in this board chamber. And so, one of the reasons why I also thought this was appropriate as a co-sponsor to bring to adoption without committee reference is because this is a state law that we are all familiar with, that we discuss, that we debate, because we often have our hands tied behind our backs as we try to work around the state law to keep tenants in place in their homes and also to make housing more affordable. We've also had several months to review this state proposition. It is one that I know tenant activists had started beginning to campaign for in January. They brought it to the Democratic Party convention a couple of months ago, where the delegates voted to support overturning rent control, which became this state proposition. And I know that since July, Prop 10 committee campaign members have been contacting me to ask me to sign on to the initiative, gave me the legislation so that I could read it. And so it appeared that many of us have had a number of months to both consider our position on this, but also I think given all of the discussions that we've had on eviction protection 2.0 and inclusionary housing, we understand how Costa-Hawkins has tied our hands. I think very specifically what we should know is that repealing Costa-Hawkins is just repealing the state's ability to manage the power of California cities to regulate our own rental markets. So nothing magical happens per se the day after the passage of Proposition 10. It merely allows this Board of Supervisors to pass ordinances that we've been talking about for years, including legislation that would protect tenants like my friend whose wife passed away last month. And it would certainly ease a lot of our negotiations around mandating or even
increasing voluntary contributions to our affordable and middle-income housing markets, if we didn't have to create all of these elaborate contracts to get developers who actually want to build affordable housing as part of their project developments here in San Francisco. So I just think on balance, it's important for us to state our support as one of the most progressive cities in the state of California for the repeal of this measure. I think it's very important to distinguish homeowners and landlords. If you are a homeowner living in your home, Costa-Hawkins doesn't have any impact on you. And then finally, I would say this, I'm reading this book a little bit late, but my summer reading was Evicted, which is a book based on evictions in the city of Milwaukee. And while the narrative is focused on the city of Milwaukee, it is a story of America. Evictions which, 50, 60, 70 years ago would cause entire neighborhoods to come up in uproar when one of their neighbors would get evicted, is now so commonplace that it happens to tenants on a regular basis in cities across the country. And in fact, the most evicted group of any group here in this country are African American women. And it is said that African American women are evicted at rates similar to or higher than African men are incarcerated in prison. And I just think that as we talk about evictions and tenant rights, this is a national narrative. It is deeply impacting this city, and part of the reason why we have not been able to address the eviction crisis here in San Francisco is because of this state law which protects landlords, and I think it is just overreaching in its protections. And it doesn't mean that all of these things fall away. It merely means that city legislators will be able to set up laws that protect their tenants, and I think we should have faith in this body that we would pass legislation that is fair to both sides. And if we don't see the repeal of Proposition 10, we will not be able to do that.
Okay. Do we have any other comments on this issue?
I have one follow-up for Supervisor Kim. Thank
President of
Supervisor. Thank you. Supervisor Kim, how, just connect the dots for me, how would the repeal of Costa-Hawkins, if it were not in existence or we amended it, how would it have a positive effect on the letter, the recipient of the letter that you received?
So currently our hands are tied in passing an ordinance that would, let's say, protect a tenant who recently lost a family member who's the main leaseholder of a unit. And so currently, we can't pass any legislation. Let's say we thought the appropriate amount of time. And this is actually something that's very appropriate for discussion. Should we permit a 6-month or 1-year moratorium on rent when a member of a family or household passes away to restrict a landlord's ability to raise their rent because their name was not on the lease? For example, that is something that I could introduce next Tuesday if Costa-Hawkins wasn't today in effect. What Costa-Hawkins does is that it ties our hands as city legislators from introducing that legislation and having a debate on it. And of course, at that point, landlords and tenants would come to us expressing, their thoughts, their feedback. This is what works. This is not what works. And it would be the role of this body to evaluate what is the fair balance in the situation, whatever that might be in the end of the day. And Costa-Hawkins prevents us from even having that dialogue at the city level. And so it is the prescriptiveness of Costa-Hawkins in tying the hands of city legislators and protecting our constituents that I oppose. I actually think that there are many elements that we would want to keep, because I don't want a state where landlords don't feel comfortable renting their units on the market. That does not work for us either. And second, we need certainty. In any business that you want to go into, we know that business owners need certainty in how they are going to make money from the business that they run. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of the criticisms of Prop 10 that we're hearing today, but that would be the role of the cities to provide that for our constituents, our tenants, and our landlords.
Thank you. I'm going to pivot to Supervisor Tang very quickly. If you could just kind of articulate the small property owners' perspective as to what they're fearful of in the repeal of Costa-Hawkins.
Sure, through the chair. And I think Supervisor Kim kind of mentioned it earlier, which is that, we don't want to hit the other extreme, which is what I think I experienced representing the Sunset District. A lot of people, their number one reason for why they don't even put current units out on the market, or why they don't go and engage in building ADUs, for example, is because of this fear, again, whether it's substantiated or not, that their home will be subject to rent control. And so I think that over the years, what I've heard is that just that potential of the repeal alone has been such a deterrent for so many people to even want to rent. And I think that, we talk about all these potentially thousands and thousands of units that are available that are not being rented out to tenants. And I think that is absolutely the case in the Sunset District. We have a lot of people who are fearful, and that's all they ever talk to me about, these small property owners, when I see them. And so that is a challenge. So no matter how much I work on trying to remove barriers to permitting for ADUs, for example, I don't know that we're going to see that uptick in creation because of this idea of the repeal. But as I mentioned earlier, without knowing the details of what local law and how that will change as a result of a potential repeal, it's hard for me to even talk about what those impacts might be, but there is a huge fear right now.
This fear, is it grounded in any fact or any data, or is it just fear, a perception of just not understanding how the system works?
Through the chair to Supervisor, or to President Cohen, so right now there is a reality that people in my district who are small property owners, I'm not talking about the big property owners, but small, single family homes, they are not renting out. They are currently, a lot of them, not renting out units that could be available to tenants. They're also not creating new in-law units, even though they probably have an illegal one. They're afraid to legalize, or they don't have one and would have the space to create a new one. They're not because they don't want to be subject to rent control. That is a reality.
Right. I understand that they don't want to be subject to rent control, but you said, we kept pivoting back to fear. I'm just trying to understand this fear. Usually it's a fear because there's an example or some kind of egregious behavior that happened. I mean, I don't understand the fear, and no one has articulated to me. So I'm just using this as an opportunity to better understand. I hear that the small property owners don't like, would rather keep their units vacant than bring it to the market. But what I don't understand is why. What are they fearful of? A tenant from hell coming in?
I mean, we have dealt with, again, we all in all of our offices deal with situations where there's maybe a landlord behaving badly or a tenant behaving badly. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, many of these property owners have had maybe tenants that haven't behaved well as in their roles. Again, we see situations from all sides, and I think some of them have unfortunately experienced bad situations with tenants, for example, and they feel that they have to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to reoccupy the units, whether it's an owner move-in or not, or what have you, right? So, I mean, those are the laws that exist right now, but unfortunately, again, the number one reason that is cited to me is that they don't want to subject their units to rent control.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Ronan.
Yes, President Cohen, I just wanted to also comment on that question, because it doesn't make sense to me that they're fearful of being subject to rent control because they're a single family home, and so they're not renting to anyone. I think what they're fearful of is if they add an ADU that is just cause eviction, which, whether you're a single family home or you're a 2-unit, just cause eviction already applies. So I don't really understand. I think to me it feels like there's some confusion over this fear of, this scary thing called rent control. I think what I have heard many times is if a tenant turns out to be irresponsible or isn't paying their rent, that it's so costly to evict someone. Mm-hmm. But that's about just cause eviction that already applies, not rent controlled. So I want to make sure we're talking about the right law.
Through the chair, thank you, Supervisor. And I agree with you, and that's my understanding. But Supervisor Tang represents a large handful of small property owners that have articulated their displeasure in the repeal of Costa-Hawkins today. And I'm just trying to understand, other than I'm a small property owner and I don't want it, I don't want the repeal, I don't understand what the fear is.
Okay, Supervisor Kim.
Thank you.
Well, first I just want to point out that these property owners are already not renting today without the passage of Proposition 10. But second, I think what I would articulate as a fear is that the Board of Supervisors would go crazy and implement all this legislation that would only protect tenants and not landlords. And that is conceivable.
Mm-hmm.
However, in my 18 years following this Board of Supervisors, I just think given our vote count and also the fact that we need housing on the market, I mean, my guess would be that this board would pass legislation that's balanced. And by the way, we're one of the more progressive cities in the country. So, I mean, in the state of California. So I would think that we would be on the cutting edge of any type of tenant protection ordinances beyond other cities. So I think that is the real fear, is that we'll go crazy and establish all these laws that, I don't know, ensure that tenants can stay in their units no matter what they do. I just doubt that this body would ever do that. In my experience, at least during my 8 years serving and my 18 years watching this board, is that we are moderated in how we move forward because A, we represent so many different stakeholders. B, it would not benefit us to pass legislation like that because we would lose so much housing on the market. In fact, developers would stop building if we extended rent control to new units. And so there has to be a certain period of time. Actually, I agree that there should be a period of time that new construction is not limited by rent control, for example, because we want to make sure that those that are investing in these new developments make their money back before we bring them in under rent control. Ideally, it'd be some type of rolling rent control year to allow owners and developers to kind of see the investment of their money come back to them. Anyway, I just think that there has to be a level of faith in the legislative and democratic process. And of course, the public would come out and explain to us, how certain things would either benefit or hurt them. Repealing Costa-Hawkins and supporting Proposition 10 merely allows us to have that dialogue, which we cannot have today.
I appreciate, through the chair.
I'm going to allow Supervisor Safai to speak. He's on the queue.
I'm just going to add on to a little bit of some of the questions that you have, because I want to tell you what's happening in real time on the ground in my district. There's a lot of, you talked about African-American homeowners. We have the second highest number of African-American homeowners. We have the highest number of those aging in place that are homeowners. And so you have multiple family members that oftentimes some families want to return to the city. So there's more of a kind of flexible understanding. You have a rental agreement with a tenant. The tenant might live there. I bump into consistently a number of people that have lived in these homes for a number of years, and they have a good relationship with the tenants. But what I've also heard, and the homeowner, but what I've also heard from these homeowners is if it were a situation where rent control were imposed on a single-family home, they would no longer want to participate in that. What's also happening because they want to have the option of having a family member or a child or someone to come back into that home. And as Supervisor Ronan said, there's different legal remedies to go, what processes to go through. But the idea of imposing a Costa-Hawkins on a single-family home, that's where the consternation lies in my district. The other thing that I wanted to say through the chair, I wanted to ask Deputy City Attorney John Givner. I don't think there's necessarily as much apprehension about this body, but I think there could be apprehension about taking the issue to the ballot. And if we were to pass Proposition 10, is it conceivable that people could take this issue to the ballot and circumvent the Board of Supervisors through ordinance and impose whatever version of new rent control rules they could if Costa-Hawkins were repealed?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, the voters can adopt any ordinance that the Board of Supervisors is empowered to adopt. And so the voters could adopt an amendment to the rent ordinance, and there could be a petition circulated. In fact, the voters have adopted a number of different ballot measures over the years amending the rent ordinance, which limits this body's ability to amend the rent ordinance currently.
Yeah, because I agree with Supervisor Kim in her presentation that we tend to be more balanced in our conversations here. I think the fear that I have heard in the last couple of months as I've gotten the feedback is the idea of this going to the ballot and causing, that's the level of consternation as it pertains to our district in single-family homes. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, President Cohen.
Thank you very much. So, this conversation has actually been really, really enlightening. Thank you. I just want, for the record, to the best of my knowledge, no tenant advocate has ever reached out to my office to inform us, to educate us. It's only been years of serving on the Land Use Committee that I have a rudimentary understanding. And, it's interesting because I kind of feel like the tenants advocate community always go to their their go-to people, Supervisor Kim, which is why you heard from them. I mean, that's also an example of what concerns me about a little bit to the point that what Asha was making is that people will always go to their friends first, and then if you're not friends or you have a tepid relationship, then you don't always get firsthand information. I don't even know if it would be necessarily true or accurate, and for me, that is where the uneasiness lies, is that I don't have total faith and confidence. I have faith in this body necessarily on the thought process, on how we just have processes put in place. But as you know, an item can get on the ballot, and we have seen in recent past, I think recently some legislation that passed for housing, I think it was for teachers, that was a voter initiative that got on the ballot and is tied up in the court because of, from what I understand, I don't know if this to be the fact or not, but to be because of writing. So when you put an initiative on the ballot, there is no flexibility to make any changes or tweaks. I mean, unless it's, of course, written in. And so that's a little bit where my uneasiness is. However, I do like the idea of being able to have the conversation. If we can't even have the conversation if Costa-Hawkins is in place, I think also this uneasiness is that what we're seeing playing out is probably speaks to how the politics play in San Francisco, where people just don't trust each other, and that has to do with just bad relationships and burnt relationships over time. As an elected official, I am a rent control. I live in a rent control unit, but never have earned any support within the tenants community, largely because of they just don't identify with me, and they think I don't identify with them, and I think that has really hampered and hampered the conversations in this city. This level of fear that has ratcheted up only because basically you don't play for my team and I don't play for your team, and I think it's hurting us because I can see both sides to the benefits of Costa-Hawkins. I want to be able to restart this conversation, but we restart the conversation, and then next thing you know, then perhaps it goes too far, and overzealous advocates start putting measures on the ballot. I don't know. That then would adversely hurt a lot of the constituents that I represent and that I articulated that I care for. I don't know the right answer. And I'm sure you're nodding in kind of acknowledgement of what I'm saying. You understand a little bit of the dilemma of where I am. And I just use my own experience on how Proposition 10 came to the ballot, who came to speak to me and who didn't come to speak to me. And up until today, President Mr. Peskin, Supervisor Peskin, has been very thoughtful in his approach. But all through August, I haven't heard from anyone. I want to recognize Christine Pelosi. She did reach out a couple days ago. And I just wasn't in a position to articulate questions at the time. So that is where we are today. And yes, the executive board or the E-board and the Democratic Party certainly took public positions on it. But I believe that the folks that were vociferously in favor of it did a due diligence of educating, connecting, and reaching out to people. And unfortunately, they didn't do that with me. And so here we are. I don't know if I'm a swing vote in this, but now I'm forced to make a decision almost on the fly when I've had a limited amount of information and understanding given to the details. I want to know detail-wise on how this affects District 10. Supervisor Kim, thank you for being so knowledgeable and sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it. And Supervisor Peskin, thank you too for coming to meet with me, and to Ronan and Tang for sharing and Safai for sharing your perspective on what you're seeing on the ground. Because everything that you just all described is a culmination of what I see and experience on the ground every day, real time, for my beloved District 10. And what's interesting is that I have not heard from an overwhelming number of constituents one way or the other. So Mr. Supervisor over there, Mr. Acting Chair, Mr. Acting President.
Would you like me to act like a president right now? I could ask for a vote.
You absolutely. Why don't you do that?
Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
On item 30, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai.
No.
Safai, no. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, no. Supervisor Tang.
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Brown. Brown, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Fewer.
Aye.
Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes, with Supervisors Safai, Stephanie, Tang, and Cohen in the dissent.
Madam President, I'd like to refer the matter.
Just real quick.
to
So I just want to just acknowledge that the resolution has failed. Supervisor Peskin.
So what I'd like to do is make a motion to rescind the vote and send it to committee, or alternatively, I can just reintroduce it and send it to committee, but just be easier if we just vote to send it to committee and then we'll bring it to the board.
So Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to rescind. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Ronan. Can we take that without objection? Without objection. All right. Motion has been rescinded. Madam Clerk.
Motion to send it to committee.
All right. A motion made to send to committee. I don't believe that needs a second. Is that correct?
It does, Madam President.
All right. Supervisor Ronan has sent it to committee, and we will take up the matter further in committee. Can we take that without objection? All right. Without objection. Thank you. All right. Democracy at its finest, right here, right now, real time. Good job, everyone. Madam Clerk, what's next?
In memoriams.
In memoriams.
Okay. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals on a motion made by Supervisor Safai for the late Miss Velma Wills, a motion made by Supervisor Yi for the late Mr. William Zhang, on behalf of a motion made by Supervisor Peskin for the late Mary Gallagher and Linda Peterson, and a motion made by Supervisor Kim on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors for Dr. Don Bohulano Mabalon.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda.
Yes, Madam President.
Great, thank you. Is there any further business before us?
That concludes our business for
All right,
today.
thank you. We're adjourned.